Why do people vote for Democrats? So the other day, I talked about why people vote for Trump and then the separate question of why people support Trump. Now I'm going to be talking about the other side of the coin, essentially. Why do people vote for Democrats? And I'm not singling out any Democrat, although I'll talk about some different names, because I don't think that the Democratic Party has someone who's as iconic to them as Trump is. And Trump has now run 3 times, unlike any of the recent Democrats. So let's talk about the Democratic base. And if you're someone who's trying to convince your friends to vote Democratic in this election or in future elections, you might benefit from hearing some of this. So one reason is correctly understanding that the Democratic Party is the party of lesser evil. And this is primarily among the left flank. So they see the Democratic Party, they see the Republican Party, and they go, wow, these two candidates are corporate warmongers, and they are sellouts to the establishment, and they're not socially progressive enough. They're not going to codify Roe versus Wade or whatever, and they're very dissatisfied with both of them. But they recognize that the Republican Party is simply more extreme. They're further right. They'll lead to a complete dismantlement of the administrative state, massive tax cuts for the wealthy and no tax cuts for the middle class. And they say, you know what, I don't want that. They might call the Republican agenda fascism, like many of them call Trump's agenda. So they're like, yeah, if I have to choose between a boring milquetoast neoliberal and a literal fascist, I'll choose the neoliberal. You know what? I'll settle for it. So that's part of the reason. That's generally just the left flank of the Democratic Party. It's these types who view them as lesser evil. Then we get to some of the Democrats, the Democratic voters, who don't believe that the Democratic Party is the lesser of two evils, but believe that they're generally just kind of good. You know, they're a little better, at least. There might be some people actually who are more right-leaning. They might agree with the Republicans on some issues, but they look at the Democratic Party, and they look at the Republican Party, and in the Democrats they see competence, and the Republicans they see incompetence. And what do they base this off of? Well, there could be a lot of things. So there's the Republican Party's history of nominating candidates who are not qualified to be president. So think about George W. Bush. They nominated him twice. Think about Donald Trump, has no political experience. Like Bush at least had 4 years as governor or so, but Donald Trump, no political experience at all. Just nominating him based on feels. That's what got him through. They just liked the idea of owning the libs. And so these Democratic voters, they see the Democrats and the Republicans and they go, well, the Republicans just nominate incompetent people all the time, people with no experience, people who are unqualified. The Democratic Party, they nominate people, I might not agree with them on every issue. I might think that they say stupid things every once in a while, but they nominate people with experience. They nominate people who seem competent. You know, Obama, he was a senator. Hillary Clinton, a senator and a member of Obama's administration, and the First Lady for what that's worth. Joe Biden, a senator for like over 30 years, vice president of the United States, and now running for president in 2020. They suck it up and they vote for him because they're like, he's competent and Trump's not. Kamala Harris, again, a senator and then a vice president. And they're like, yeah, so I'll take her over Trump. You know, she's competent. Like, she knows how to run government. Trump does not. Trump doesn't know the first thing about government. So they see the Democrats as just the more competent party, the party of adults, the party of people who know how to manage things, the party of people who know how to appoint other competent people. So I think that's another part of why people vote Democratic. Another issue would have to be, I can't go without mentioning this, is economics. So the Democratic Party has been to the left of the Republican Party on economics ever since FDR, at least. That would be, 1932. Generally favoring more regulation, higher taxes on the wealthy, lower taxes on the poor and the middle class. And I think there's a lot of people who, not to mention unions. There are a lot of those union types who are like, hey, the Republicans hate unions. The Republicans go after unions. They think we're lazy. They think we're stupid. I can't vote Republican, There are a lot of union people, I think, who might remember some of the ways in which unions were treated under the Reagan administration. And Reagan actually got some union support, but now a lot of the anti-union policies that were put in place under Reagan are coming to light. More people are talking about them. And they might see how Joe Biden has treated unions, his NLRB policies, and they say, you know what, I'm a union member, middle class Joe's got my back or whatever, so hey, I'm voting Democratic. They just say, hey, we want higher taxes on the wealthy, we want more economic regulation. These people might even be like social democrats or democratic socialists in terms of economic policy, even if they don't call themselves that. So they put that policy first and foremost, economics, and they say, hey, I'm voting Democratic. And you know what else? Some of them might even have like Stone Age social views. They might be pro-life, or even more socially conservative than that, not believe in any exceptions. And they might be strongly opposed to gay marriage and find homosexuality to be a sin and immoral and quote unquote degenerate. They might be very strongly against immigration, but they know that the Democratic Party generally tends to have their back on issues related to unions. So that's the economic aspect of it. People look at how the economy does under Democrats, and the economy tends to do better under Democrats. That's just the truth. Not in every single way. This doesn't necessarily mean either that the Democrats are always the ones causing the economy to be better. But the fact of the matter is that people associate how well the economy is doing at a given point with the president. Crazy as that is, I know the president does not press a button that says create jobs or bring back manufacturing jobs, but the president can do policies that will further those goals. So there's that. Unions, economics, all that. There's also, just the issue of social justice. And social justice is not something that I've read up extensively on. I haven't read a whole lot of critical race theory, a whole lot of gender theory. I haven't read any gender theory, but there's a lot of people who just look at the Republican Party and they're like, this is the party of bigots. It's the party of racists, sexists, homophobes, transphobes, xenophobes. And some people kind of overuse those words, let's be honest. But yeah, they see the Republican Party as the party of hate, the party of, hey, white, straight, cisgender Christian men are the only people who really matter. They're the people who run the show. And so they run away from the Republican Party and they want to vote against them. So they're like, yeah, I have to vote Democratic, even if I don't agree with them on foreign policy or economic policy. It's the social issues that matter. So yeah, they look at the social issues and they're like, okay, maybe the Democrats aren't as socially as progressive as I want them to be, but they're good enough, Joe Biden was one of the first people to actually start pushing for same-sex marriage, even before Obama, surprisingly. Biden's older than Obama too. So they look at the social policies. They have a concern for social justice. They're afraid of how a Trump administration would impact racial and sexual minorities. They don't like the way that Trump has spoken about immigrants, saying, they're criminals, they're rapists. Some, I assume, are good people. They don't like the idea that he floated a Muslim ban. Remember, a total and complete shutdown on Muslims coming into this country until we figure out what the hell is going on. They don't like that. They're like, hey, I'm going to vote for the Democrats because at least the Democrats aren't really quite as bigoted. And yeah, look, we can assess the merits of that. I don't think that every Republican is racist. I don't think that everything that Democrats say that Republicans said are racist is racist, but it's the way that a lot of people feel. A lot of people feel like the Republican Party is a party of hate, so they'll vote Democratic. Now, there's also the issue of foreign policy. I do not think that foreign policy strongly motivates voters, but let's face it, it's kind of an issue. There might be some neocons actually who look at Trump and they're like, well, this guy's an idiot. They look at the Democrats, they're like, well, these guys suck too. But they feel like Trump is beholden to Putin. They feel like he doesn't stand up for our allies. He's abandoned our allies. Kamala Harris, Biden, Obama, the rest of the world takes them seriously, at least. Like, they're adults, and the rest of the world just laughs at Trump. So it's like, hey, let's get someone to represent us on the world stage who doesn't look like a total clown, who's not like an orange cretin, who throws temper tantrums, both in person and on Twitter. So there's that aspect. The foreign policy, I mean, I just don't know how much foreign policy plays a role. I think there's a thing of, hey, we want to have someone who represents the United States well. And there have been studies which have shown that under Obama, the United States was viewed a lot more favorably than under Trump. And then after Biden took office, our reputation just started improving internationally. People just take Biden more seriously. They like him better. He's a more likable person to people from other countries. And I know this is anecdotal, but my friends have stories of themselves going to other countries and people just trash talking Trump. They're just like, man, that guy is an idiot. Oh my God, I'd like to punch that guy in the face. But yeah, it's anecdotal, but still, it kind of goes to show you like, hey, if you want the rest of the world to like you, vote Democratic. So, sorry, it's just the way it is. And that's not to say that there aren't conservatives throughout the rest of the world. There are. But it tends to be the people of the Democratic Party who put a better face on America. Now, we do have to get into some other stuff, some reasons that I think are not as good for voting Democratic, but still exist in people's minds. And that is the identity reason. We know that Barack Obama was the first black president, Hillary Clinton was the first woman president, and Kamala Harris could end up being the first woman of color president. So let's just address this. There are people who voted for Obama almost exclusively because he was black. There are people who were motivated by that. And I'm not saying they voted the wrong way, but I am saying it's debatable as to how much you want to let identity really control your vote. Suppose that the Republicans had run Mark Robinson, a guy who calls himself a black Nazi. Should people really vote for that guy just because he's black? I don't think so. Would people really want to vote for Sarah Palin as vice president, even though she would be the first woman, she would have been the first woman vice president? I don't know. But people saw Obama and they were like, hey, he's the first black president. I think that sounds cool. It's going to look great in the history books. Sign me up for that. There may have been some people who voted for Hillary Clinton because she would be the first woman president, or that they were motivated by that. And I think there are likely some people who are motivated by Kamala Harris's race and gender to vote for her. They just feel like it's a great sign of progress. And, I guess I don't want to be too harsh on Democrats here, because I don't think that Democrats would actually vote for a Republican if a Republican would be the first woman president, the first black president, Hispanic president, Asian president, what have you. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think that identity should play a huge role in decision making for who you vote for. But there's that. That's something to consider for why people vote Democratic. And I think it's one of the less convincing reasons. And then another less convincing reason, but one that just exists, is the feels. There are a lot of people who just say, hey, the Democratic candidate makes me feel good. It might not be that much about policy, but that's all right because they make me feel good. And we know that this is the case with Trump and his supporters. They say, hey, he makes me feel confident about myself. He makes me feel good about America. He makes me feel good about hating people that he trash talks, and he makes me feel good when he trash talks the media, and oh, isn't that so convincing? But yeah, it exists on the Democratic side too. Think about all the people who were just wowed by Obama. He has a lot of charisma. He's a great public speaker. He's good at talking about policy too, generally speaking. And yeah, whether you agreed with what he said or disagreed, you had to admit he was a great speaker. So I think a lot of people liked the way that he spoke about America. There's no red America, no blue America, just the United States of America. No white America, no black America. They thought that was really convincing. He made them feel good. And I think that part of the reason Hillary Clinton lost, actually, is because she didn't make people feel as good. She just didn't. People were not that impressed with her public speaking. People didn't find her very authentic. I think Joe Biden kind of tapped into that feel-good thing a little bit again, although he's less charismatic than Obama. But he said he kind of borrowed the no red states, no blue states, just the United States. And he was able to convincingly campaign on unity because he was against Donald Trump, a man who loves nothing more than to divide people and put them against each other. So he benefited from that, even though he's certainly not the perfect example of charisma or smooth public speaking. I mean, he has a stutter, he forgets people's names, but hey, he was able to be convincing as a unifier during the 2020 election. Maybe not so much if he were the nominee in 2024, but hey. Kamala Harris, again, I think she does make some people feel good. She has a happy-go-lucky vibe to her, a sort of whimsy that either repels people or gets them to like her. I think it mostly just repels Republicans who are like, ick, oh, I don't like her, she's a Democrat. They were already predisposed towards hating her. But, what are you going to do? So there is a feels element to the Democratic Party. And I think their candidates need to tap into that. I think we're starting to see some of that with Tim Walz a little bit too. I think that if you want your friends to vote Democratic, you should show them some clips of Tim Walz. Maybe not the clip of him at the debate where they asked him about his visit to Tiananmen, but he has his good moments. He's charismatic. He's generally likable. He's affable. He can be funny. Just a generic Midwest dad who likes to make people feel good and has riz for the most part. So yeah, there is a bit of a feels element, but I think that the most important reason that people vote Democratic is policy. It's just policy. Sorry. And the same can't be said for Republicans. If I had to use one word to describe why people vote Democratic, it is policy. It's not Trump hatred. It's not feels. It's not vibes. It's not identity, but it's policy. It's just that they feel like Democrats will enact better or less bad policies than Republicans. Climate change. Republicans don't want to do anything to fix climate change. A good chunk of them, not all, but a good chunk of them believe that it doesn't even exist, that man-made climate change does not exist. How are you going to fix that problem if you don't believe that problem exists? Economics obviously is part of the policy thing. Social policy, concern about abortion bans. Now that Roe versus Wade is dead, it's like, hey, I don't want my state to ban abortion. I don't want some far-right type getting appointed on the Supreme Court. And think about that. If Trump gets elected, Alito and Thomas might just retire, or at least one of them. So, yeah, a lot of people are just concerned about the direction that the country would head in under Trump. But they also feel like the Democrats offer policies that are generally good, and almost universally better than the policies that the Republicans push. Yeah, and a lot of the times when people do disagree with Democrats, they point that out too, but they say, hey, I'm still going to vote for them. And they might say, hey, I don't agree with the Democrats on raising the minimum wage. I don't think that raising the minimum wage is exactly helpful to the economy, but I agree with them on a lot of other stuff. I'm a little more pro-life than the Democrats. I think that abortion should be a little more restricted, although not banned. But I think that the Democrats are better on the environment and foreign policy and economics. So that's my policy reason for voting for the Democrats. People who are not part of the Trump team tend to focus more on policy. And I think the Democratic concern over policy has been amplified thanks to Trump and his refusal to discuss policy generally, his straying away from a policy-focused campaign, his focus on vibes, his focus on revenge. The media is the enemy of the people. Pelosi and Schiff and the far-left lunatics are the enemy from within. This is stuff that he actually says. So there's policy. That's my number one thing. So if you're trying to convince people to vote Democratic, and that they're, they might be center-right, they might be centrist, they might be center-left, they might be far-left, and they think that the Democratic Party is so full of neoliberals, think about everything that I've said and how it relates to voting for Democrats. Make arguments primarily based on policy. Don't say, hey, don't you like Kamala? Isn't she so nice and likable and sweet? Don't you want a hug from her? No, don't focus on vibes. Focus on policy. Talk to them about the implications for the climate. Talk to them about the implications for the economy. Does Donald Trump really care about working class Americans? Is he really looking out for them more than the wealthy, who he has promised to give another tax cut, billionaires and multimillionaires another tax cut? I don't think so. Foreign policy. I mean, you might applaud Trump for not being as hawkish as a lot of people thought he would be when he got elected. Okay, but he wants to start war with Mexico. He's shown himself time and again to get into petty fights over Twitter. What if he gets into a fight with a foreign leader over Twitter? That is foreign policy that we do not want to have. The Democratic Party provides a more steady hand of leadership in the realm of foreign policy. Social policy. Again, this one is a little more polarizing in that I feel like if there's one policy that Republicans care about the most, it's actually social policy. You know, think about how much types like Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles talk about transgenderism. Other people, they talk so much about like freaking, oh, we want to repeal same-sex marriage again. And then stuff like immigration too. We know that Republicans love to talk about that. But bring up the fact that, hey, look, Fox News might be telling you that the border is open, but it's objectively not. It's not. Sorry. If we had open borders, you would know it, and we don't. So yeah, these are the general policy arguments I've given in favor of Democrats, or that you can make to friends who want to vote Democratic. I've given the reasons, the things that might be holding Democrats back. Lack of charisma during this election at times. Lack of a really compelling message on some policy issues. Not sufficiently appealing to those who are further left. Especially think about on Israel, Gaza. There are people further left who are very, very resentful of Democrats on Israel and Gaza. But you got to make the argument with them. You got to get them to vote blue. Talk to them. Talk to them about what's at stake. Yes, it's fine to say that you do not approve of the Israel-Gaza policy of the Biden-Harris administration, but there are other issues, and these issues matter whether you like it or not. So yeah, that's just my spiel. I hope that you found it interesting, insightful, or helpful, and I hope that you will use some of these points when you're talking to your friends and trying to convince them to vote. And if you found it interesting, helpful, or insightful, please leave a like, comment, or subscribe to the channel. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'm trying to grow this channel, and I look forward to speaking to you in the next video.